Do you ever hear popping, clicking, or snapping sounds in your dog and you're not sure what it is? Well, today we're going to discuss that in this video and give you 4 different examples of why this can happen. So once again, I'm Adam and this is Bo, and we're going to discuss snapping and clicking sounds coming from your dog. The first one is very common, and it's probably the most common out of all of them. And the good thing is it's benign. It's benign in the sense that nothing really bad is happening and there aren't any long-term effects associated with it. And that is when the muscle or the tendon is rolling over other soft tissue or bony tissue in the body. So what happens in different ranges of motion, the muscle will lengthen, and when it lengthens, it will create tension along that muscle. So think of a guitar string, and if you grab one of the strings with your finger and you pull it long enough, what eventually will happen is there's enough tension built up in the string that it will pluck or roll off of your finger, and it creates that kind of plucking or popping sound as the string pops off your finger. Now the same is true with these tendons or the muscles in the body. As they lengthen in certain ranges of motion, they can roll over bony tissue or other muscular soft tissue in the body. And it's very common to get that through, the back end or through the shoulder blades where there's a lot of moving parts, and these can cause that clicking and popping sound. Now, one way that you can determine if this is in fact going on is typically it's pretty superficial. So these are the larger prime mover type muscles where if the dog is walking and you're hearing those, you can just hold your hand over that area and you probably will feel a vibration or that pop sensation underneath your hand. Now sometimes it can be deeper than that, and we're going to touch on those and why that can happen in a minute. But the other thing that will happen, and how you can almost be certain that this is the case, is if you feel it, but if it's also repeatable. So that's really important, because the next one that's also very common that we're going to talk about is not typically repeatable in terms of these loud pops and snaps that you may hear. So this will happen over and over again, and your dog typically will not show any signs or symptoms of pain or discomfort when this is the case. The second reason why you might hear some popping and clicking is when the joint moves beyond its normal range of motion. So this may be with an applied pressure, you hear this pop. That's no different than if you go to a chiropractor like myself and you hear a loud adjustment through the joint, or if you're cracking your knuckles or your shoulders, that's what's called a cavitation, and you're hearing this pop. Now what's important is you're quickly gapping this joint at its basically end range, and when that happens it creates this audible noise. Now this is not going to happen repetitively, so there's a refractory period with the properties within the joint that need a little bit of time, about 5 to 10 minutes, to restore their normal properties and physiology so that pop can be heard again. So if you're hearing repetitive popping and clicking in your dog, it is probably not what I just discussed. Now, third is another common one, and it's related to the joint as well, and that's when there's crepitus in the joint. So crepitus is a term we use for joints that are worn out. So in most joints, there's articular surfaces that come together, and those both have cartilaginous smooth surfaces on them. Now, when they go together, there's usually a fluid in between there that helps to lubricate the joint. With time, repetitive strain, even just a previous injury or surgery, the normal biomechanics of these joints can change, and it can cause those joint surfaces to fissure, to get more rough, and it causes that joint fluid to wear out. So the space between the cartilaginous surfaces actually decreases. A result of that is osteoarthritis. So very common in dogs, especially it's associated with older dogs because it's obviously more prominent the longer it's been there, it's more evident. And typically we see the signs and symptoms of this. So some of the signs that you might notice is you might notice atrophy around the joint that's causing the popping and clicking. So atrophy is the wasting away of muscles. This is typically disuse atrophy in this scenario. Or you might also notice the joint, if we use the stifle or the knee for example, is a lot thicker than the one on the other side. That could be from a little bit of swelling, but oftentimes it just feels like the bone is thicker. And sometimes if it's been there long enough, the body will lay down more calcium around the joint to help stabilize it and protect it. So feel for that, see if you can notice that. When you're moving the joint through just a passive range of motion, it's like the knee here, just moving around, you'll typically feel like almost a grinding sensation, sometimes a little bit more of a distinct pop or click in there. It will be repetitive in most cases. And what you want to do in those scenarios is you want to open up the joint to allow the fluid to rush in there and help lubricate it and take some pressure off that joint. Now, the fourth and final reason why this may be happening and hearing these pops and clicks is that your dog actually has laxity within their joint. So for example, this is really common in dogs that have dysplasia. So we'll use hip dysplasia for an example. And that is a ball and socket type joint. But what happens in dysplasia is that socket doesn't have enough stability. So as a result, we see the socket or the ball, move and sometimes slide right out of that socket rather than stay in there nice and secure. When that happens and you're getting this luxation or you're getting this complete dislocation in some cases of the ball out of the socket, you might hear a loud pop or a click or a clunk. So oftentimes that is felt. I know I have a few dogs that I've seen with hip dysplasia, just with them walking, I can hold their back and I feel that vibration come up to their back because it's, bone conduction through the pelvis into the spine, so it's pretty easy to feel. But if you go to a trained professional and they can isolate the joint and they can figure out where that pop is coming from, then there can be some things you can do to rectify that. Now, in some severe cases, if the joint is completely dislocated and it's way out of position, then obviously you need to follow up with your vet, get some imaging. It's always best to err on the side of caution, and sometimes you might need even surgery to help stabilize those joints. But if that is the case, you'll typically notice other signs and symptoms with your dog where the back end is lowered, there might be wasting of the muscles, and typically the gait patterns are completely different than a normal dog. So it may be normal to your dog because that's what they've been doing their whole life, because this is a congenital type disease in most cases, or condition. So if that's normal and you just say, well, my dog has always walked funny, sometimes there's a reason. So check that out, isolate the area, and you want to make sure that you're getting that looked at by a professional as well. So I hope that helps. Those are 4 different reasons why your dog may be experiencing popping, clicking, or clunking in their body. And 9 times out of 10, it's very benign, and it's just either some changes to the joint or some tension built up in the muscles, and you don't have to worry about it too much at all. Thank you for watching that video. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, you might enjoy this one that's over here. Or if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. It helps us out a lot and it keeps you up to date with our latest content, and you can do that right over there.